Hello, everyone. I think we can start. So, good morning and thank you for coming along to our webinar. I'm sure this will be a great use of your time and we'll keep it moving and make sure we respect your time. My name is Kaya Figlarska and I'm a sales support specialist at Kirkhoff Technologies Managed Service Provider. Joining me today is Isabel Schmidt, our virtual Chief Information Officer and Assistant Vice President for projects. She works with our clients to create a vision for information technology that meets the organization's objectives and then works with our project team to implement that vision. We invite you to actively participate by joining the chat and posting any questions you might have in the Q&A section. At the end of our presentation, we will answer all of your questions. Now, without delay, I will hand over the virtual microphone to Isabel. Thank you so much for coming.
Great, thanks, Kaya. All right, so what we're going to be going through today is upgrading or moving on from Windows Server 2012 to newer systems that offer better performance and security, and kind of what the modern technology landscape looks like for small business, particularly when it comes to on-premise infrastructure. We'll take you through a bit of the history of Windows Server. We'll talk about what the Windows Server lifecycle is, what the end of life means, and some details around your options. So a little bit about the history of Windows Server. Windows Server started over 20 years ago now, just after the year 2000. And it really transformed the way that small businesses were able to do on-site computing. Before Windows Server, of course, there was just a lot more complex systems, one system for identity, one for management, one for file, a different system for email. And Microsoft Windows Server, particularly the small business server package, really kind of brought all of that into a feasible on-premise infrastructure for small business. Over the count of the next 10 to 15 years, things continued this way. Small business server, of course, included Exchange Server, which allowed small businesses to host their own email. That was a terrible idea. But at the end of it, since about 2015, a lot of those on-premise services and servers have moved to cloud services and managed services. So, for example, that small business server Microsoft discontinued, the last version was in 2011, in preference of Microsoft 365 to just kind of take a lot of that management out of the small business's responsibility. So Windows Server 2012 was kind of the last go-to operating system choice for small organizations that had zero cloud connectivity, really, built into it from the ground up. It later got support and things were added into it, but it was kind of the last operating system that was entirely focused on just kind of on-premise small business infrastructure. Since 2012, the world has, of course, changed quite dramatically, particularly in a post-COVID world, where the technologies that on-premise infrastructure used to have to do 10, 15 years ago no longer requires the organization to manage and maintain that kind of infrastructure on-premise. So while Server 2012 was an incredibly important operating system at the time, it's become much, much less relevant in today's current small, medium enterprise technology landscape. What is the server lifecycle? A Windows Server lifecycle is the period of time that Microsoft provides support and updates for a specific version of Windows Server. The lifecycle typically contains two phases, the mainstream support phase and the extended support phase. Mainstream support is the first phase, during which Microsoft offers security updates, non-security updates, incident support, warranty claims, they do design changes, and they answer feature requests. The second phase is extended support. During extended support, Microsoft only offers security updates and paid incident response. There's no features that are added to an operating system that has gone into extended support. This entire life cycle generally lasts for about 10 years. Each version of or edition of Windows Server, depending on the release date, has about 5 years in each phase. And every server has an end of life. We went through this just a couple of years ago with Server 2008. Some organizations who might have had that on-premise small business server, they went through this process and had to retire those a couple of years ago. And just like we are here today talking about Server 2012, in a few years we'll be talking about Server 2016, and even through to the end of the current release of Windows Server 2022, you can see Microsoft has already identified what that end date is going to be that far out. You can see most of these operating systems had that approximate 10-year life cycle. Some things, like I said, Small Business Server is a little bit less because it was based on Server 2008 R2. So it shared the end of life date. So this means that on October 10th, 2023, Microsoft will not be releasing any patches or fixing any vulnerabilities or bugs that affect Windows Server 2012 or R2. Also, Microsoft will not be able to provide any support or guidance to fix any issues with this operating system. What does this mean for security? Well, Microsoft releases server updates on the second Tuesday of each month, known as Patch Tuesday. When the October release happens, that will be the last time it does. When these releases happen, Microsoft makes public the vulnerabilities that were fixed in that version of the patches. So what does this mean for November's Patch Tuesday? Microsoft on Patch Tuesday for November is going to post a list of vulnerabilities in supported operating systems, many of which will also exist in Server 2012. There will be a post made that contains all of the vulnerabilities that are not patched in Server 2012 in November. Without the security updates, your servers will be vulnerable to cyber attacks that could compromise your data and applications and the entirety of the network. Hackers often target outdated operating systems that have these known exploits and weaknesses. If you're in an industry that has compliance, having an out-of-date operating system can force you out of compliance. This can result in, of course, fines, penalties, and legal actions if there's a data breach or data leak. And also, without the performance enhancements and bug fixes, the server experience is going to be slower. Over time, you're going to run into more complex problems. And ultimately, the downtime is going to wind up being more costly than fixing the problem would be upfront. So what is it you can do about it? To avoid the risks and ensure your servers are staying secure and reliable, you pretty much have two main options. The first and most obvious one, of course, is that you can upgrade to a newer version of Windows Server. There is upgrade paths for Windows Server 2016, 19, and 2022 from Server 2012 for the most part. Some of these upgrades will require or are better done as migrations to new installations of the server. And in some cases, we can just do a very simple in-place upgrade of the operating system to bring it up to speed. In that particular case, you usually do roll through subsequent versions. So you would go from 2012 to 2016 to 2019 to 2022. Generally, that kind of a large upgrade we wouldn't recommend. We would be looking at migrating services over to a new installation. Of course, with the new Windows Server operating system, if you were still running 2012, it's very probable you're still also on the hardware that came with that 2012 server. If that is the case, you are likely going to want to be looking at hardware replacements in conjunction with the server. And then the little bit more complex option is to migrate off of your on-premise infrastructure. You can migrate your servers to cloud-based platforms like Microsoft Azure that enable access to scalable, flexible, and cost-effective cloud services that are always up to date and supported by Microsoft. So maybe you're running an on-premise SQL Server in Server 2012, it might make more sense rather than upgrading to a new version of SQL Server and Server 2012 or Windows Server. You migrate that to an Azure database where you don't have to do any database maintenance. You don't have to do any Windows Server maintenance. So things like this, these are options. As part of the migration to Azure, you can continue to use Server 2012 securely for a few more years. We don't really recommend hanging on to Windows Server, but if you do migrate it to Azure, Microsoft has support programs that exist. This is called extended support. It is not available outside of an Azure Cloud Service Provider subscription. If you do need this, it is something that Kirkhoff Technologies can help you with as a cloud service provider. Then the other option is to just simply migrate to cloud services directly. Do you still need that on-premise server anymore? Most of the services that Server 2012 served for small, medium enterprise is now duplicated by Microsoft 365 and the Microsoft Modern Work platform. Azure Active Directory, SharePoint, OneDrive, Intune, now called Endpoint Manager, can fulfill the role that Server 2012 was filling and probably do it better in this modern workplace. What are your options to help you decide? Well, if you don't have the in-house IT staff or your in-house IT staff do not have experience in a CIO role, it might make sense to reach out for help. As a virtual CIO, we take the time to educate you on your choices, to learn about your organization, to learn about your business objectives, and design technology solutions that meet those organizational goals. The digital advisor or VCIO in this particular role can be incredibly powerful in unlocking the potential of an organization. We can do business technology review processes, or BTRs. All of our clients that have proactive agreements with KTI are well aware of these processes. And in general, none of our clients are in this position where they would need to attend this webinar in recycling or replacing a Server 2012 because they've gone through this process for the last 2 years. The business technology review process assesses your organization for where it's at currently and works with you to develop an IT roadmap that meets your business or organizational objectives. If that standard assessment is not enough, we can do very detailed, tailored assessments. In these assessments, we meet not just with a couple of key stakeholders or an IT manager in an organization, we meet with the business leaders. We sit down and we plan out the next kind of 3 to 5 to even 10 years of what an organization's long-term strategy when it comes to technology and business look like. These assessments will range anywhere from a few $1,000s up to, tens of thousands of dollars, but they really unlock the potential of an organization, and the business leaders can have confidence that they know that the technology that they're implementing today is a great foundation to build a business on that's survivable in the long term. If you're a Canadian business that is for profit, that technology planning step that we were just talking about, the government of Canada has some help for you on this. The government will reimburse you 90% of up to $15,000 to develop that digital adoption plan through the Canadian Digital Adoption Plan program. Once you have a digital adoption plan, you can unlock up to $100,000 in 0% interest loans in order to implement the plan. The Canadian Digital Adoption Plan is strictly for the VCIO services that I was just talking about. We did do an entire webinar on that a couple of months ago. Do go look it up. It's on our website and our YouTube if you're interested in that. In order to be eligible for it, you have to be a Canadian business, less than 500 employees. You have to be for profit, have at least $500,000 in revenues, privately owned or privately controlled. Canadian corporation. Don't just take our word for it. Our clients are generally very, very happy with the outcomes of the work that we do for them. We really do take the time to understand your organizational objectives and find the right solutions for you and your team. What we're offering you today is to book that business improvement review with us, which can be the first step in a CDAP if you qualify for that. We could identify if you qualify for a CDAP in that. Or it's just a free 1-hour session to work with us to implement, at least get an idea as to where you're at with your organization and what stage of digital adoption you need to be engaged at. All right. That kind of wraps up where we're at with Server 2012. Did we have any questions?
By the looks of it, we don't have any question yet, but feel free to leave any questions you might have. And I just wanted to say that Natasha has just dropped in the chat the link to our YouTube video from the past webinar. And I wanted to ask you a question, Isabel, the question that the clients usually ask. I didn't come up with it myself. So how much does the extended support on cloud service provider license cost?
Oh, yes. So we don't actually know that yet. Microsoft is really kind of down to the wire, and we're expecting it to be available any day. Pricing on these services, they always depend on the configuration of the server. How many CPUs it has, how much RAM it has, so on and so forth. Really low, you're looking at like if you had like a SQL server that you needed to maintain in Server 2012 and SQL Server 2012, and you're going to do that through the Azure CSP Extended Support Plan, you would be starting for like $100 a month and going up from there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for the answer. It doesn't look like we do have any questions, so I think we can move ahead with the next slide.
All right, our next webinar coming up at the end of September is going to be about protecting your organization from cyber threats. Primarily what we're going to be focusing on is cyber insurance. We're going to talk about cyber insurance, why cyber insurance is really important, and then take you through a standard application form so you can get an idea as to what you're up against if you're looking to engage with cyber insurance for the first time, or if your cyber insurance policy has been renewed with a much more in-depth questionnaire. So we're going to be going over that at the end of September. And once again, if you need to contact us for talking about IT roadmap planning or Server 2012 migrations, the Canadian Digital Adoption Program, or any managed CIO, VCIO, or managed IT services, don't hesitate to reach out. If you go to our website on Discovery Call, you can actually book a meeting directly from the website, and otherwise reach out to us by phone, which we didn't actually put in there. Maybe if one of you can just post that in the chat really quick, or reach out to sales@kirkoftech.ca. All right. And we're wrapping up a little bit early today, but it's always nice to get some time back. So we're going to wrap it up. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.